Agatha Raisin and the Amber Amulet. A glittering necklace, a pompous historian, and a sudden death turn a quiet village evening into a very personal mystery for Agatha Raisin. Stay with us for tonight's mystery. Tell us where in the world you're listening from, and subscribe so you never miss an upcoming mystery. Agatha Raisin swept into the Castle WI Hall with the confidence of a woman who fully intended to dazzle, and was irritated not to find anyone worth dazzling. The turnout for local heritage evening was pitiful, a scattering of villagers parked on metal folding chairs, the occasional cough, and Doris Simpson standing at the front like a sergeant major disciplining a lazy regiment. "You're late, Mrs. Raisin," Doris announced, her voice carrying with the joyful righteousness of someone catching a rival out. "We've already started." "Then I'm sure you can catch me up, Doris," Agatha replied, brushing past her. She lifted her chin a little higher than necessary, making certain her new amber necklace caught the hall's harsh fluorescent light. She had spent an outrageous amount on it, knowing full well that her bank account disapproved. Still, it was worth it. The amber glowed warmly against her skin, and she had imagined at least one gasp of admiration. No gasp came, only a few polite glances, followed by whispers. Agatha's irritation spiked. Doris cleared her throat pointedly. "Tonight's speaker is Mr. Clement Hardwick, noted amateur historian." The man in question, a lanky figure with the smug expression of someone deeply impressed with himself, stepped forward. "Noted indeed," he said, as though the title had been bestowed upon him by the Queen. "We are here to discuss ancient Cotswold settlements and the mysterious artifacts left behind." Agatha folded her arms, unimpressed. Hardwick continued droning, waving slides far too quickly and rambling about pottery shards and something called ritual enclosures. Agatha's attention wandered. She admired her necklace again, convinced the amber made her look exotic and interesting in a way the WI members sorely lacked. Then Hardwick stopped mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on Agatha's neck. "Good heavens," he said loudly. "That necklace, madame, may I?" "No," Agatha replied instinctively, stepping back. But the hall had already leaned forward, curiosity buzzing. Hardwick ignored her refusal and approached anyway, peering so closely at her chest that Agatha wondered if she should slap him. "That," he declared, raising a finger theatrically, "resembles the lost Baltic amber amulet from the Castle excavation." The hall erupted in delighted gasps. Doris Simpson pressed a hand to her bosom in mock shock. "You don't say!" Agatha flushed. "It's just a necklace I bought in Mercester." "Impossible," Hardwick said. "The original was carved using Iron Age techniques. Oh yes, I'd recognize it anywhere." His voice rose with feverish enthusiasm. "This piece was said to influence fertility rituals among—" Agatha snapped. "I don't need help with fertility, thank you." The hall cackled. Even Mrs. Bloxby, sitting in the back, hid a small smile behind her programme. Hardwick continued pontificating. "If it is the amulet, this is a remarkable moment in local history. Might I examine the clasp?" "No, you may not," Agatha retorted, but he was already reaching. She felt a brief tug as his fingers brushed her neck. She swatted him away, furious. "Boundaries," she hissed. "You must have heard of them." More laughter. Hardwick flushed, then tried to regain command of the room by talking even louder, as pedants always did when threatened. The rest of the event limped along. By the time they reached tea and stale ginger biscuits, Agatha's temper simmered dangerously. She was aware of the whispers following her like persistent gnats. "Hodge appreciates my jewellery more than this lot," she muttered. At least her cat had taste. Outside, the evening had settled into quiet village stillness. Agatha pulled her coat closer and stormed toward her car, heels clicking sharply on the paving. Behind her, Hardwick emerged from the hall, still arguing with Doris Simpson about the proper cataloguing of artefacts. His voice rose, pompous and nasal. "I tell you, Doris, the amulet's significance cannot be overstated. Mrs. Raisin may have no idea what she stumbled upon." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Insufferable little man," she muttered. Then came the sound, a choked gasp, a stumble, a heavy thud. Agatha spun around. Hardwick lay crumpled on the ground, one hand clutching at his throat, the other reaching skyward as though appealing to a very inattentive deity. Doris screamed. Mrs. Bloxby hurried forward, calm but pale. "Oh dear. Someone fetch Bill Wong." Agatha's pulse hammered. She approached cautiously, half expecting Hardwick to leap up and accuse her of ruining his archaeological destiny. Instead, He was still, unmistakably still. "Is he—" Doris couldn't finish. Mrs. Blocksby knelt, checking gently. "I'm afraid, yes." For a moment the hall's exterior became entirely silent, as though the village held its breath. Agatha swallowed hard. She realized something else was wrong. Her necklace was gone. She clutched at her throat. Empty skin, no clasp, no chain. "Oh no," she breathed. Doris gasped again. "Mrs. Raisin, your cursed amulet gone." "It is not cursed," Agatha snapped far too quickly, but panic crawled up her spine. Had Hardwicke tugged it free? Had it fallen? Or, her imagination leapt, had someone stolen it while she was distracted by the collapsing historian? Before she could form another thought, headlights swept across the scene. A familiar car door opened. Bill Wong stepped out, his expression tightening as he took in the tableau. "Evening," he said gently, "though I'm guessing it's not a good one." Agatha pointed, flustered. "He just fell over, right after being himself." Bill examined the body with quiet professionalism. "No obvious injuries," Bill said. "Cause of death isn't clear yet." Doris announced loudly, "Or excitement. He got far too worked up about that necklace." "Amber doesn't kill people, Doris," Agatha muttered. Bill gave her a mild look. "Your necklace? The one he was talking about earlier?" "Yes, well, someone's pinched it." Agatha lifted her chin defiantly, aware this would only fuel gossip. "It must have come off when Hardwicke grabbed me, or someone snatched it from the floor." Bill stood, thoughtful. "We'll need to check the area tomorrow in daylight. For now, I'll have the body taken in and a routine assessment done." The small crowd murmured. Castley residents lived for drama, and this was the sort that would keep them fed for weeks. As Bill organised matters, Mrs. Blocksby rested a hand on Agatha's arm. "Try not to worry. Things aren't always what they appear." Agatha managed a stiff nod. "Thank you, though I don't relish being the centre of the latest village scandal." "Oh, Agatha," Mrs. Blocksby said gently, "you do have a gift for it." Agatha opened her mouth to protest, but the words died on her tongue. She could feel Doris's eyes boring into her from across the scene. Doris Simpson marched over, arms folded. "I suppose you'll claim innocence, Mrs. Raisin, but you were the last one he spoke to." "I didn't even like him," Agatha cried. "Exactly my point." Agatha bristled. "Oh, do go home, Doris. You're adding nothing of value." Doris sniffed, but Bill's gentle authority redirected her toward a cluster of villagers eager to retell the same story for the third time. When the small crowd finally dispersed, Agatha lingered near the hall, unsettled. Her throat felt oddly bare without the necklace. She replayed the moment of Hardwicke tugging at the clasp, the slight pressure of his fingers. Something about it had felt deliberate. She hated that thought. Bill approached. "I'll swing by tomorrow morning. Try not to lose sleep." "As if I'd waste perfectly good sleep over an obnoxious historian," Agatha said tightly. Bill gave her a sympathetic nod and walked away. Agatha stood alone for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the village settling down. Somewhere behind her, the hall door banged shut. A prickle crawled along her neck. Not fear, annoyance. She did not enjoy mysteries that began with her humiliation. "Brilliant," she muttered. "Absolutely brilliant. Trust me to buy a necklace that turns into evidence." She got into her car, slammed the door, and began the drive back to her cottage, her vanity bruised, but her curiosity sharper than ever. When she arrived home, Hodge greeted her with his usual mixture of disdain and affection, weaving between her legs. Agatha bent to stroke him, grateful for the stability of a creature who didn't judge her fashion choices. "You'd have admired the necklace," she told him, "unlike this wretched village." Hodge blinked, unimpressed, then trotted off toward the kitchen. Agatha sighed, removed her coat, and reached for the kettle. She wasn't cold, but tea offered a comforting distraction, and something to do with her hands besides throttling Doris Simpson. As the kettle clicked off, she stood at the counter, staring into nothing, replaying the scene again and again. Hardwicke's obsession, the tug at her neck, the missing amulet. And then, quietly, the horrible truth settled. The necklace wasn't just lost, it might be the first clue. Hodge leapt onto the counter, where he knew he wasn't allowed, and settled smugly beside her elbow. Agatha didn't push him off. "Fine," she murmured. "Stay there. At least one of us is having a pleasant evening." She poured her tea, took a steadying sip, and stared through the kitchen window into the darkened village lanes. Carsley slept. Agatha Raisin, however, did not. Agatha Raisin woke to the particular silence that meant Carsley had already decided she was guilty of something. It was never loud judgment that unsettled her. It was the quiet. The sort of quiet in which neighbours smiled too sweetly, paused too long, and watched her walk past as though expecting her to sprout horns. She sat up in bed with a groan, pushing aside the duvet and glaring at nothing in particular. Hodge, curled comfortably on her pillow, opened one eye and flicked his tail across her cheek. "Don't you start," Agatha muttered. She swung her legs out of bed and padded toward the dressing table. The empty necklace box sat there like a personal insult. Hodge hopped down, batted the lid with casual cruelty, and sent it clattering to the floor. "Honestly," Agatha snapped, "have some respect for archaeological evidence." Hodge blinked, thoroughly unbothered, and thumped his tail against the carpet. Agatha dressed briskly, wanting armour rather than comfort. A fitted jacket, a smart skirt, and enough perfume to command attention. If the village was determined to gossip, she would meet it head-on. Vanity had its uses. Downstairs she made tea with unnecessarily sharp movements. Every clink and rattle helped to direct her irritation outward. As she sipped, she replayed the previous night's scene. Hardwick collapsing like an overacted stage death, Doris Simpson shrieking, Bill Wong's calm arrival, and the devastating realization that her necklace had vanished. It was mortifying enough to be publicly ridiculed. Losing the jewellery altogether felt like being stripped of dignity. A knock interrupted her brooding. She opened the door to Mrs. Bloxby's warm, sympathetic face. "Good morning, Agatha. I hope I'm not intruding." "Only on my peace of mind," Agatha said, stepping aside. "But that's been thoroughly compromised already." Mrs. Bloxby entered with the gentle efficiency of someone accustomed to calming the emotional storms of others. "There's a rather unfortunate amount of talk already," she said softly. "People don't mean harm, they simply enjoy a narrative." "They enjoy my humiliation," Agatha corrected. Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but you do rise rather magnificently to these occasions." Agatha sniffed. "Last night was hardly magnificent." "No," Mrs. Bloxby agreed, "but it was memorable, and villagers do like memorable things." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Has Doris begun poisoning the well?" "I believe she prefers to think of it as clarifying the water." "Ha! With her it's more like stirring mud." Mrs. Bloxby's kind expression remained steady. "Bill will be in touch soon. Until then, perhaps it's best to keep to ordinary routines." "Ordinary routines send me to the Red Lion," Agatha said, "which is precisely where everyone will be whispering." "All the more reason to go," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "People gossip less directly when confronted with the subject." Agatha groaned, but accepted the logic. When Mrs. Bloxby left, offering one last encouraging smile, Agatha felt marginally fortified. Not cheerful, never that, but fortified. She grabbed her handbag, told Hodge not to destroy anything valuable. He blinked innocently, which meant disaster, and marched toward the Red Lion. The pub was already lively for morning. A cluster of regulars were gathered near the bar, their heads leaning conspiratorially together. Conversations dropped a fraction when Agatha entered. "Oh, don't mind me," Agatha said loudly. "I'm merely the woman whose jewellery caused a death." Several villagers winced. One coughed. Another studied their pint as if desperately hoping to drown in it. Fred Jessup cleared his throat. "No offence meant, Mrs. Raisin. People are just a bit surprised." "Surprised that a historian can expire without warning?" Agatha asked sharply. "Or surprised that I happened to be near him when he did?" "Well, both," Fred said honestly. Agatha resisted the urge to smack him with her handbag. She took a seat at a corner table, smoothing her skirt with dignity. Soon enough the whispering resumed, softly, but not softly enough. It didn't take long for the village grapevine to bear fruit. Hardwick, it seemed, had offended nearly everyone in recent weeks. He had lectured Bert about improperly maintained hedgerows, corrected Mrs. Mason's story about Roman coins at least 3 times, and declared Carsley's church documents charmingly misguided. His interest in old land deeds and parish records had been met with universal irritation. Agatha listened, surprised but secretly relieved. "So, he annoyed the entire village," she said. "Good. Makes a change from me being the only target." "That man made a career out of nitpicking," Fred said. "Always thought he knew better than everyone." Worse than Doris? Agatha asked. A respectful silence followed. Even gossip had limits. The pub door banged open dramatically, and Roy Silver breezed in, coat swirling like an actor entering stage left and demanding applause. "Aggie!" he cried, spotting her immediately. "Darling, why didn't you tell me you were mixed up in some cursed necklace business?" "It isn't cursed," Agatha said through clenched teeth. Roy dropped into the seat opposite her. "Well, that's what everyone in London is saying." "How does London even— Never mind, I don't want to know." "It's simple," Roy said proudly. "I told them." Agatha stared. "Roy, must you broadcast every humiliation I suffer? Isn't the WI enough?" "I'm giving you mystique," Roy insisted. "Tragedy, pagan secrets, a mysterious death linked to your personal accessories." "Accessories do not kill people," Agatha snapped. "Depends on the accessory," Roy murmured, "and the person wielding it." Agatha glared, but Roy only fluttered his fingers, delighted with his own drama. Another figure slipped in more quietly, Charles Fraith. Looking effortlessly composed, he crossed to their table and gave Agatha a small, amused smile. "Heard you caused a spectacle," he said. "I did not cause anything," Agatha replied. "The man simply died." "With your necklace in his hand?" Charles asked. "No," she hesitated. "Not in his hand. It's just missing." Roy gasped. "Stolen? Of course. That explains everything. Perhaps the curse requires—" "Roy," Agatha said, "if you say blood sacrifice, I will throttle you." Charles chuckled. "Ignore him. Though it is interesting, Hardwicke wasn't the sort to get worked up over nothing. He probably enjoyed being hated." Agatha blinked. "You're suggesting he provoked villagers deliberately?" "Oh, undoubtedly," Charles replied. "Some people thrive on discord." Roy placed a hand over his heart. "Like Aggie!" Agatha reached across the table and pinched him. Before Roy could shriek theatrically, Bill Wong entered the pub. The room fell into a reverent hush. Even gossip had to acknowledge official authority. Bill approached the table with a tired smile. "Morning. Thought I'd find you here." "I'm not hiding," Agatha said defensively. "I didn't say you were," Bill replied kindly. "But we need to talk." He sat, folding his hands. "There's nothing obvious about Hardwicke's death. No injury, no medical history we're aware of. The doctor needs more information." "So, he didn't just drop dead?" Agatha asked. "Unclear, but we have to consider possibilities." Bill hesitated. "Your necklace is now officially of interest." Roy squealed. "The curse!" Agatha groaned. "Roy, please," Bill continued. "Also, Hardwicke's research notes appear to be missing." "What research notes?" Agatha asked sharply. "He kept detailed records of everything he reviewed. Land deeds, excavation disputes, church files, all gone from his room." Agatha felt a small, satisfied spark. "So he made numerous enemies." "Quite possibly," Bill agreed, "but we still need to find your necklace." Agatha sat straighter. "Then I want to help. I refuse to be sidelined while people mutter about cursed trinkets and murder." "No one is saying murder," Bill said carefully. "Yet," added Roy. Charles leaned back, thoughtful. "Hardwicke mentioned disputes over an old excavation. Someone must know more." Agatha felt momentum rising. "Then I'll find them." Bill looked resigned. "Just be careful." "Careful is my middle name," Agatha said. Roy snorted. "Your middle name is Trouble." Agatha ignored him with dignity, rising from the table. She felt the familiar fire of determination stirring, fueled partly by indignation, partly by pride, and mostly by a desire to reclaim her lost jewellery. As she reached the pub door, Fred Jessup called after her. "Mrs. Raisin, thought you'd want to know, the antique shop where you bought that necklace. Closed up this morning, completely empty." Agatha froze. Roy gasped dramatically behind her. Charles raised an eyebrow. Bill exhaled softly. Agatha slowly turned back toward Fred. "Closed? As in shut for the day?" Fred shook his head. "As in gone. Vanished. No notice. No forwarding address." For a moment, Agatha merely stared. Of course the shop had disappeared. Agatha Raisin never had ordinary mysteries, only ones that came wrapped in humiliation, gossip, and vanishing antiques. "Brilliant," she muttered. "Just brilliant." She pushed open the pub door and stepped into the village lane, her heels clicking with renewed purpose. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed faintly. Agatha squared her shoulders. If Carsley thought it had enough gossip now, it hadn't seen anything yet. At home, Hodge lifted his head from the windowsill as she entered, stretched lazily, and blinked as if to say he had expected no less. Agatha sighed and placed her handbag on the table. "Well," she told him, "it seems we've got ourselves another mess." Hodge yawned, then curled decisively back into sleep. Agatha Raisin marched into Mercester with the grim purpose of a woman determined to reclaim both dignity and jewellery. The antique shop stood on a narrow side street, tucked between a florist and a bakery. Normally it displayed a cluttered array of relics and curiosities. Today, its windows stared out blank and accusing, stripped bare as a plucked chicken. "Oh, marvellous," Agatha muttered. "The one time I buy something meaningful, the shop evaporates." She rattled the locked door. A closed sign hung crookedly inside, but the emptiness beyond it made the sign feel like mockery. She peered through the glass, hoping for movement, a forgotten teacup, anything that suggested temporary closure. Nothing. A woman from the florist next door leaned out. "Looking for Lydia?" "Preferably alive," Agatha replied. "Where's she gone?" The florist shrugged with theatrical mystique. "Vanished yesterday. Packed everything in crates. Lorry came at dawn." She lowered her voice. "Heard her having a right row with that historian chap. The one who died. Tall, nasal, thought he owned the street." "Hardwick," Agatha said tightly. "That's the one. He came storming in 2 days ago. They shouted about provenance and authenticity. Lydia looked ready to brain him with a candlestick." Agatha's jaw tightened. "Did she leave an address?" "No. Just said she was closing shop for personal reasons." The florist made air quotes with a flourish. I assumed it meant trouble. Agatha thanked her, though the woman's cheerfully nosy smile grated. Returning to her car, she felt her irritation sharpening. The closing of the shop on the very morning after Hardwick's death wasn't coincidence. Carsley villagers couldn't organise a raffle without an argument. Yet when it came to disappearance, the world around Agatha suddenly became alarmingly efficient. Back in Carsley, the WI Hall buzzed with that particular brand of sanctimonious enthusiasm Agatha loathed. She stepped inside just as Doris Simpson lifted a hand like a traffic warden. "There you are, Mrs. Raisin," Doris said, voice dripping with community righteousness. "We've had a discussion. The WI believes you should surrender any other dubious foreign artifacts in your possession." Agatha stared. "Foreign artifacts? Doris, it was a necklace, not a smuggled idol." "It caused a death," Doris insisted, "or at the very least distress." "It caused distress because Hardwick was a pompous idiot," Agatha snapped. "You'd think you'd be grateful someone finally shut him up, even if temporarily." Doris gasped with the joy of moral offence. "Mrs. Raisin, that is not an appropriate sentiment." "Oh, please," Agatha said. "Half the village would have done it gladly if they could have got away with it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall, quickly replaced by silence when Doris shot everyone a glare. Mrs. Bloxby stepped forward with her serene diplomacy. "I'm sure Agatha didn't mean that literally, Doris. We're all simply unsettled. There's no need to assign guilt or blame." Agatha folded her arms. "Exactly. And if anyone's guilty, it's the antique dealer who's scarpered." Mrs. Bloxby offered a gentle nod. "Then perhaps we focus on facts, not accusations." Doris sniffed but retreated, sensing she'd lost her moment of glory. Agatha exhaled, grateful for Mrs. Bloxby's intervention. Left unchecked, Doris would have organised a village tribunal. Leaving the hall, Agatha spotted Bill Wong striding across the green toward her. His expression carried that careful neutrality police officers used before delivering information that would annoy her. "Agatha," he said. "A word?" She crossed her arms. "Do tell me you found the necklace." "Not yet," Bill admitted, "but I've learned something. Hardwick was planning to present evidence next month that the amulet, the real one, was stolen decades ago from land belonging to the Carsley Church." Agatha blinked. "Church land? So my necklace is now ecclesiastical property?" "Possibly," Bill said. "He believed he could prove it. The church council wanted nothing to do with it, but Hardwick was determined." Agatha felt the familiar prickle of annoyance. Of course he was. The man probably lectured God about how to arrange the 10 Commandments. Bill smiled briefly. If the amulet is connected to church land, it's not just financially valuable. It could have historical and legal implications. So whoever has it now might not want it found, Agatha said. Exactly, which is why you need to be cautious. Agatha ignored that part. And the antique dealer? Lydia Bracewell? She's run off. Bill nodded. Suspicious, yes. But don't jump to conclusions. People disappear for mundane reasons too. Not in my life they don't, Agatha muttered. They flee, hide, or cause scandals. Bill hesitated. One more thing. Hardwick had a confrontation with Bracewell about authenticity. She sold you that necklace, didn't she? Yes, Agatha said, bristling, and it looked authentic enough. Hardwick claimed otherwise. Loudly, I'm told. Bracewell didn't take it well. Agatha's irritation flared. So now I'm wrapped up in a quarrel I never asked for. That sums up most of your cases, Bill said gently. She glared, though only moderately. Fine. What do you suggest I do? Stay out of trouble, Bill paused, which I know you won't. Agatha gave a tight smile. You know me too well. As Bill walked away, Agatha felt suspicion knot tightly in her stomach. Hardwick arguing over authenticity, Bracewell fleeing, the shop emptied overnight. It all pointed to something very wrong. Returning home, she entered her cottage with determination. Hodge leapt onto the table, scattering yesterday's post onto the floor. Agatha bent to pick it up, muttering about feline sabotage. A small cream envelope lay among the bills and catalogues. No stamp, no return address. Her name scrawled in uneven ink. Agatha tore it open. Stop digging. No greeting. No signature. Just the two words, threatening in their simplicity. Agatha stared at the message, pulse ticking in her throat. Someone was watching. Someone didn't want questions asked, and someone believed she was dangerous enough to warn. Ha, she said aloud, lifting her chin. Clearly they've underestimated me. Hodge nudged her elbow, purring faintly as if approving the challenge. Agatha placed the note on the counter, the kettle clicking to life beside her. As steam began to rise, her irritation sharpened into resolve. If someone wanted her to stop digging, they were about to be deeply disappointed. She stroked Hodge between the ears, her voice softening. Looks like we've annoyed someone important, darling. Hodge settled into a loaf-shaped sprawl, tail flicking once before stilling, just the sort of domestic endorsement Agatha needed. Don't smirk at me, Agatha snapped. I am perfectly capable of scholarly work. Charles Fraith smirked anyway. He had arrived at the churchyard just as Agatha emerged from the vicarage with Mrs. Bloxby's permission slip to consult parish records. He leaned against the stone wall with lazy elegance, hands in pockets, every inch the amused aristocrat. Research suits you, he said. Very BBC documentary. Perhaps you'll start wearing tweed. I own tweed, Agatha retorted. It just doesn't own me. Charles laughed softly. Lead on, Dr. Raisin. Agatha ignored him and pushed open the door to the parish records room beside the church. The interior smelled of old paper and lavender polish, a scent Mrs. Bloxby insisted kept moths and mischief away. Sunlight slanted through the high window, falling across shelves of ledgers and boxes neatly labelled in the vicar's careful handwriting. Compared with the chaos of Agatha's home office, the room felt intimidatingly orderly. She drew a breath, straightened her shoulders and began scanning the boxes. We're looking for references to the Carsley excavation, something about an abandoned dig in the 70s. Charles peered over her shoulder. Didn't know you were alive in the 70s. Charles, she said warningly. Sorry, you're timeless. That's worse. He chuckled as Agatha tugged out a thick ledger labelled Parish Matters 1974-1980. She placed it on the table with more force than necessary, sending a soft puff of dust into the air. Ah, she said, flipping pages. Here we are. Excavation proposal, rejected. And another entry. Public dispute regarding artifact claims. Charles raised an eyebrow. Sounds terribly exciting. Everything sounds exciting when you don't have to do the work, Agatha muttered. She skimmed deeper. Here. Objection by E. Linton. Edgar Linton. Name rings a bell. Older chap, Charles said. Lives on the far lane with the peeling hedges. Has opinions on everything. Agatha snorted. He'd fit nicely in the WI. She read aloud from the ledger. Mr. Linton alleges investigator Clement Hardwick removed items without permission. She stopped. Charles whistled quietly. So Hardwick had enemies decades before you gave him your death glare. I didn't give him a death glare. Agatha, your glares have range. That one may have been fatal. She pushed him. This proves Hardwicke wasn't universally adored. He must have antagonized half the county. Probably more. He had a natural talent for it. Agatha traced the old cursive noting that the dig had been halted after villagers protested Hardwicke's methods. The ledger mentioned disputes, rising tensions, and accusations of academic theft. "Edgar Linton led the charge," she murmured. "I need to speak with him." Charles glanced toward the door. "You may also need to speak with whoever's been watching you." Agatha froze. "What?" He tilted his head slightly. "Don't look sharply, just subtly." Agatha attempted a subtle glance, which in practice looked like a startled owl whipping its head sideways. Across the lane, near the wall of ivy, someone stood half in shadow, a figure in a coat, motionless, watching. Agatha's stomach tightened. "How long?" "Since before you came out of the vicarage," Charles said lightly. "Could just be a villager curious why you're fraternizing with dusty archives. Or someone trying to keep history buried," Agatha whispered dramatically. Charles grinned. "And people say you exaggerate." The figure shifted slightly, then walked slowly away, disappearing behind the yew tree bordering the cemetery. Agatha shut the ledger decisively. "I'm going to Linton's. Now." Charles raised both brows. "Marching up to a man who once threatened to throw Hardwicke down a trench. Brave." "Oh, please. Older men adore me." "Yes," Charles said. "They adore you because you terrify them." Agatha packed the ledger away, smoothed her hair, and strode toward the churchyard gate. The crisp morning air nipped at her cheeks. Gravestones glimmered with early frost, though the scene didn't dominate. Her focus was fixed on mystery rather than atmosphere. Charles followed lazily. "If this archaeological phase becomes permanent," he said, "I suppose I must prepare myself for dinner conversation involving pottery shards. Better than your dinner conversations involving hunting and boredom." "You wound me." The two walked toward Agatha's car. She brushed off a thin coating of dust on the bonnet, then frowned. The front left tire sagged slightly, the rubber depressed as though losing air. "Oh no," she said. "Not again." Charles knelt to examine it. "Slow puncture. Someone might have loosened the valve." "Someone?" she repeated. "You mean the shadow lurker?" "It's possible," he said. "Or you drove over something sharp. Life isn't always villainous." Agatha huffed. "If someone wants to scare me, they'll have to do better than ruining my morning errands." Charles straightened. "Shall I ring for help?" "No, I can fix a tire," she said. "I'm not helpless." He looked unconvinced. Agatha crossed her arms. "I can change a tire, Charles." "Yes, but should you?" She scowled. "Fine. Help me." Within minutes, Charles had lifted the car slightly with the jack, and Agatha had fetched the spare tire from the boot. She supervised rather than assisted, but she supervised forcefully. "You're enjoying this far too much," she muttered as he tightened the bolts. "I enjoy any task that involves you pretending not to need assistance." "I didn't ask you to come." "No," he said with a warm smile, "but I knew you'd want company." Agatha felt a small stir of something warmer than irritation. She quickly stamped on it before it grew sentimental. When the tire was replaced, she dusted off her hands. "Right, let's go." Charles hesitated. "You don't want me to come along to see Linton, do you?" "No, he might talk more freely without an audience." "I see," he said. "Well then, be careful." "Careful is my other middle name." "So I've heard." She climbed into the car with all the determination of a woman ready for confrontation. Edgar Linton lived in a cottage that looked permanently surprised. Narrow windows perched under arching eyebrows of thatch, and a door that leaned forward as though eavesdropping on visitors. Agatha knocked sharply. After a long moment, the door opened a crack. An elderly face peered out, lined, sharp-eyed, and slightly suspicious. "Mr. Linton," Agatha said in her most polite voice, which wasn't particularly polite. "I'm Agatha Raisin. I'd like a word." "About Hardwicke," he rasped. Agatha blinked. "Yes." The door widened. "Come in, then. Been expecting you." Agatha stepped into a sitting room filled with books, maps, and the faint smell of pipe smoke. Linton settled in an armchair like a perched falcon. "You knew," Agatha said, "that Hardwicke was stirring up old trouble." "Knew? Ha! He lived for it," Linton said. "Used my research once, never credited. Took my notes, published under his name. Called it oversight. Oversight my foot." "So you disliked him," Agatha said. "Disliked?" Linton barked a laugh. He was a walking grievance, but I didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking. Agatha lifted her chin. I'm asking why he was so determined to dredge up the past. Because he thought it made him important, Linton said. Churchland, stolen artifacts, ancient rites. He thought exposing secrets would make him famous. Were there secrets? Agatha pressed. Linton gave her a slow, evaluating look. There are always secrets in a village, but most aren't worth digging. Agatha felt the words land heavily. Someone else disagrees. Linton grunted. Then they're a fool. A silence followed. Then Linton sighed. If you want the truth, you'll find it in the past. But be warned, it won't thank you for uncovering it. Agatha stood, oddly moved. Thank you, Mr. Linton. As Agatha turned to leave, Linton stopped her. You'll be back, he said flatly. People always are when they find something. He waved her off. Go on then, I've said my part. She stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind her. Charles's warning about the watcher drifted back into her mind. She scanned the lane, empty. No coat, no shadow, no sign of anyone. Still, unease lingered. Agatha returned to her cottage at dusk. As she set her keys down, Hodge padded into the hall, tail curling proudly. He nudged her leg, demanding acknowledgement. All right, she murmured, bending to stroke him. At least someone's pleased to see me. Hodge settled on her foot with a soft, contented sigh. Agatha stood still, letting the weight of the strange day settle. Secrets in the churchyard, arguments from decades past, a mysterious watcher, a punctured tyre, and Edgar Linton's cryptic warning. Well, she muttered, if the past wants a fight, it's chosen the wrong woman. Hodge blinked up at her, then curled into a tidy loaf beside the radiator, offering the final domestic punctuation the day deserved. Agatha remembered Edgar Linton's bitterness clearly. He had spoken of Hardwicke's theft of research with the weary anger of a man who had carried the insult for decades. It was not a new grievance, it was an old wound reopened. Linton's jaw moved as though grinding invisible stones. Years ago, when the dig began, I told him about the amber piece, where it was found, what old families had said about it, the stories attached, oral histories passed down for generations. He leaned forward. He wrote it all down, every word. Promised he'd reference me properly. He didn't, Agatha guessed. He published an article calling it Local Rumour Compounded by Superstition. Linton slapped the arm of his chair. Rumour. After I'd given him the information directly. Agatha winced on his behalf. So you confronted him? Of course I did. Told him he'd used me. He laughed. Linton's expression curdled. Hardwicke always thought rural people were beneath him, said gratitude wasn't part of academic discourse. Agatha bristled. Arrogant little man. He returned years later, expecting cooperation for his new research, Linton said. I refused. Told him he'd have my notes over my dead body. He made rude suggestions about my longevity. Agatha felt genuine sympathy. You hated him. That much is clear. Oh, I despised him, Linton said calmly. But hatred doesn't make me a murderer. Agatha studied him carefully. His steady voice, the lines of frustration etched into his face, the honesty of an old man harbouring grudges but not malice. She believed him, irritatingly enough. I was angry, he said. But anger fades. Pride, though, that lingers. Hardwicke trampled on everyone's pride. That's why half the village could have throttled him. This interested Agatha. Who else? Any villager who gave him information and received mockery in return, Linton said. The vicar, Bert Jessup, 3 of the landowners he lectured about false boundaries. Hardwicke made enemies by the hour. Agatha absorbed this. So the amulet was central to the quarrel. Oh yes, Linton said. Hardwicke wanted it for years. Thought it would prove his theory about ritual sites and pagan continuity. He smiled thinly. He never cared whether villagers approved or not. That's why the dig collapsed. Pride on both sides. And you're absolutely certain you didn't kill him? Madam, Linton said with exaggerated dignity, if I'd ever planned to do away with that man, it would have been 30 years ago, when I could still lift a shovel. Agatha reluctantly let the matter rest. When she stepped back outside, Charles was waiting by the lane, leaning against his car with the patience of a man who had already predicted she'd spend longer than promised. Well, he asked. Agatha locked the gate behind her. He loathed Hardwicke, But he didn't kill him. He can barely lift a kettle. He threw a shovel once, Charles reminded her. In the 70s, she snapped. Weren't you paying attention? Charles smiled. I pay attention selectively. Agatha walked briskly toward her car. Linton says Hardwick antagonized everyone he met. That gives us a village of suspects. Not us, Charles corrected mildly. You. I'm merely the bystander who gets dragged into trouble. She ignored him, climbing into the driver's seat. Charles tapped on the window. Going to interrogate more people? Not interrogate, Agatha said. Investigate. Ah, subtle distinction. She drove off before he could say anything further, though she suspected he mouthed something infuriatingly amused as she left. By early afternoon, Agatha found herself intercepting Roy Silver on the phone. He answered in his usual theatrical fashion. Aggie, darling, I have news. I don't care about London gossip today, Agatha began. You will care, Roy said, because your dear historian friend, well, late historian, was shopping around a book proposal. Agatha paused. Book proposal? Yes. Something about lost Cotswold artefacts and ecclesiastical theft. Quite dramatic. My friend in publishing said Hardwick pitched it as a career-defining revelation. Agatha felt the pieces shift. So he needed the amulet to prove his theory. And needed it quickly, Roy added. Publishers weren't convinced. He had to deliver something sensationally authentic, to quote my editor friend who despises that phrase. Agatha leaned forward in her chair. He was desperate. Darling, Roy said mournfully, desperation is unbecoming in any profession, even academics, and theirs is a profession built entirely on dusty grudges. Agatha snorted. You say that as though your advertising world is above grudges. I don't hold dusty ones, Roy said, mine sparkle. Agatha allowed herself a laugh. Thank you, Roy. This helps. Of course it helps, Roy said. I am a fountain of indispensable brilliance. Just as Agatha was about to hang up, she heard movement behind her. She turned. Doris Simpson stood in the doorway to the W.I. Hall, arms folded and expression pinched. Aha! Doris cried triumphantly. So you admit it? I admit nothing, Agatha said. I distinctly heard you say the word theft. I said ecclesiastical theft, Doris, Agatha corrected. Entirely different. It sounds criminal. Only to you, Doris huffed. I have a duty to keep this village morally upright. Agatha smiled sweetly. Darling, you can't even keep the biscuits fresh. A small audience formed instantly. Mrs. Mason, Bert Jessup, two passing teenagers pretending not to care. Doris, realizing she had a platform, raised her voice. Well, Mrs. Raisin, she said dramatically, people are talking about this amulet. Some say you brought a curse. Oh, for heaven's sake, Agatha groaned. Stop reading tabloid rubbish, Doris. Then explain why the antique dealer vanished, Doris cried. Agatha froze a moment too long. Aha! Doris shrieked again as though uncovering treason. You know something. I know you're unbearable, Agatha snapped. I'm allowed to know that. Mrs. Blocksby appeared like a balm. Ladies, she said calmly, perhaps this is not the time. Agatha took a step back, grateful for her intervention. Doris glowered, defeated but simmering. Mrs. Blocksby touched Agatha's arm gently. Try not to let her rattle you. I don't let her rattle me, Agatha lied. Mrs. Blocksby smiled knowingly. That evening, Bill Wong arrived at Agatha's cottage, wearing the expression of someone bearing carefully measured news. I've just come from the lab, Bill said. There's something you should know. Agatha offered him tea, which he accepted, though it cooled untouched. We found traces of resin on Hardwick's hands, he said. Natural amber resin. Agatha's breath caught. From my necklace? Possibly. Possibly not, Bill said. But the timing fits. He handled something shortly before his collapse. Agatha sank into her armchair. But resin doesn't kill people. No, it doesn't, Bill paused. But it could mean the amulet was in his possession before he died, or that someone else handled it and transferred residue. Agatha felt both validated and uneasy. So the necklace wasn't stolen off me after the fact. Unlikely, Bill agreed. Someone knew its value, Agatha. Someone wanted it. Agatha's stomach fluttered, not with fear, but excitement. A solid clue, a direction. So Hardwick didn't just drop dead, she said softly. Bill hesitated. We don't know enough yet, but it's more complicated than we thought. Agatha rose, pacing. Everyone had motive. Everyone hated him. Everyone had some grievance. Bill watched her steadily. Don't get ahead of yourself. I'm not ahead. I'm exactly where I want to be. He stood. Just be careful. You always say that. I always mean it. When he left, Agatha exhaled long and slow, feeling the thrill of the hunt pull tight around her. As she sat, Hodge hopped onto her lap with impeccable timing. He kneaded her skirt, settled with deliberate comfort, and closed his eyes. Agatha stroked his soft fur and murmured, Darling, we're getting closer. Hodge purred, then flopped sideways, claiming her armchair as entirely his own. Of all the ridiculous possibilities, Agatha snapped, the idea that Hardwicke stole my necklace is the most insulting. Charles, lounging in her kitchen doorway as though he lived there, raised an eyebrow. More insulting than Doris calling it cursed? Yes, Agatha said. Doris is stupid. Hardwicke was deliberate. Hodge chose that moment to leap onto the counter and begin nudging her empty necklace box with his paw. The lid clattered to the floor. Agatha glared at him. Exactly, she said, mocked by Cat and dead academic alike. Charles smothered a chuckle. You need answers, not lamentations. What I need, Agatha said, snatching her handbag, is to speak with Lydia Bracewell. She's hiding something. Hiding or avoiding you? Charles asked sweetly. Same thing, Agatha replied. Come on, you're driving. They reached Evesham in less than 20 minutes, Agatha criticizing Charles's driving style at every corner. Lydia Bracewell's new address had been gleaned from a florist too fond of gossip. Agatha marched up the path of a modest semi-detached house and hammered the door. It opened a crack. Lydia peered out, pale but defiant. No refunds, she said immediately. I don't want a refund, Agatha replied. I want the truth. Lydia attempted to close the door, but Agatha wedged her foot inside like an enthusiastic bailiff. I know about the argument with Hardwicke, Agatha said, and I know you fled. Start talking. Lydia looked from Agatha to Charles, who smiled pleasantly as though this were a social call. Resigned, she stepped back. Fine. 5 minutes. The sitting room smelled faintly of lavender polish and panic. Lydia wrung her hands. Hardwicke came to my shop 2 days before he died. Said the amber piece I sold you was fraudulent. Agatha bristled. He humiliated me in front of the WI. He humiliated me in front of my own stockroom, Lydia countered. Threatened to expose me for selling replicas. He had this idea he was the guardian of historical purity. Was he wrong? Charles asked lightly. Lydia glared. Look, most tourists don't care if a trinket is original, but Hardwicke cared. He cared loudly. So you panicked, Agatha said. You ran. Yes, Lydia admitted. I thought he'd ruin my reputation, and yours was the last item he challenged me over. I didn't want scandal. Agatha folded her arms. So the necklace I wore, the one he mocked, the one I defended publicly, was fake. Lydia swallowed. Replica. Very convincing replica. Agatha inhaled sharply. Convincing? I mortified myself over a knockoff. Charles coughed politely. You did seem rather invested. Agatha rounded on him. I was wearing a fraudulent amulet, Charles. A fraudulent amulet that is now missing and being treated as evidence. Lydia raised both palms defensively. I'm sorry, truly. But the real amulet, I never had it. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Who did? Lydia sighed. Hardwicke, probably. He believed he'd found proof of its location. He said the real one was hidden somewhere safe until he could verify authenticity. Agatha stiffened. Hidden where? He didn't say, Lydia replied, only that the replica you bought was proof he was close. Agatha paced. The pieces aligned horribly. So Hardwicke may have retrieved the real amulet before he collapsed. That would explain the resin, Charles said quietly. Lydia blinked. Resin? Traces found on Hardwicke's hands, Agatha said. Amber resin, the good stuff. Lydia's expression tightened. If he touched the real amulet, then someone else knew. Someone who wanted it more. Agatha stopped pacing, and someone who didn't want him telling anyone. All three fell silent. Finally Lydia whispered, I didn't kill him. Agatha sighed. She believed her, annoyingly enough. I'm not accusing you, but you didn't help matters by disappearing. Lydia flushed. Fear makes you stupid. Agatha nodded, remembering too many moments when fear had turned her impulsive. Fine, But if you remember anything else, anything, call me." Lydia hesitated. "There was one thing. A figure watching the shop the night before I left, standing by the lamppost, didn't move." Agatha's skin prickled. "Description?" "Coat, hat, tall, that's all." Charles gave Agatha a meaningful look, too similar to the watcher from the church lane. Agatha exhaled. "This is getting tiresome." "Most archaeological disputes are," Charles said. "Don't tease," she snapped. "This one involves me." "That's what makes it fun." Agatha swatted him with her handbag and marched out of the house. On the drive back to Carsley, Agatha alternated between disbelief and fury. "I wore a fake necklace," she said. "I defended a fake necklace. I was insulted because of a fake necklace." "It looked very real to me," Charles offered. "That is not comforting." When they reached Agatha's cottage, Charles parked neatly. "There's a bright side." "Do tell," Agatha said sourly. "You no longer have to recover the fake necklace. It's worthless." Agatha glowered. "Charles, if you value your life, leave now." He winked, kissed her cheek, and strolled down the lane as though he hadn't just added fuel to her indignation. Agatha slammed her door and stomped into the cottage. Hodge greeted her by immediately climbing onto the table and rolling onto his back, paws in the air, his charming distraction technique. "Oh, don't look smug," Agatha said, scratching his belly despite herself. "I've humiliated myself over a cheap imitation." Hodge purred loudly, entirely unsympathetic. Agatha sank into her chair. The revelation brought relief. She hadn't lost an invaluable artifact, but also danger. If her necklace was fake, the real one was still out there, hidden, valuable, and touched by Hardwicke shortly before he died. "So," she murmured, "where is the real amulet?" Hodge stretched, flicked his tail, and settled on her lap like a warm, furry punctuation mark to a very troubling question. "Doris Simpson, if you don't start speaking plainly this instant, I will personally lodge you in a museum display labelled Obstruction." That was Agatha's greeting as she cornered Doris outside the WI Hall the next morning. Doris, clutching her shopping basket like a shield, blinked at her with wide, faux-innocent eyes. "I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Raisin." "You never do until someone pats you on the back for it," Agatha snapped. "Now what exactly did you see during the heritage evening? And do not say nothing. You don't breathe without observing everything." Doris pressed her lips together in a prim little line. "Well, if you must know, and you clearly must, I did see Mr. Hardwicke fussing with your clasp." Agatha stiffened. "When?" "Just before the refreshments. You were busy criticising the biscuit selection." "I was not criticising. I was offering feedback," Agatha shot back. "Doris, are you telling me he had his hands on my necklace before he collapsed?" Doris perked up, sensing her power. "If you insist on dramatic phrasing, yes. He was tugging at the clasp and muttering." "Muttering?" Agatha repeated. "About what?" "I don't know," Doris said. "I'm not fluent in pompous academic mumbling." Agatha blinked, momentarily impressed. Doris drew herself up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have errands. Morally upright errands." She swept off, leaving Agatha fuming in her wake. But inside the anger, something sharp clicked into place. Hardwicke had been at her neck. He'd touched the clasp. He'd been desperate about the amulet, and she had been distracted, very distracted, by public embarrassment. Agatha marched down the lane with the purposeful stride of a woman solving something important, and also imagining throttling someone with a tea towel. Charles found her at the Red Lion, aggressively stirring tea as though trying to interrogate it. "You're doing violence to that cup," he observed, sliding into the seat opposite her. "He swapped them," Agatha declared. "Hardwicke swapped the amulets." Charles lifted an eyebrow. "Swapped?" "Replica for real," Agatha said. "Lydia sold me a fake. Hardwicke knew it. He must have had the real one somewhere and switched them during the WI evening." "That would require motive and opportunity," Charles said. "He certainly had motive, the book deal you mentioned." "And opportunity," Agatha added. "He fiddled with my clasp. Doris actually told the truth for once." Charles leaned back, smiling. "I do enjoy when you're in full detective mode. Your eyes go flinty." Agatha ignored that. "So Hardwicke retrieved the real amulet. The resin on his hands proves he touched genuine amber. Then someone intervened." "You think he died because of the amulet?" Charles asked. "I think the amulet mattered," Agatha said. Agatha adjusted her line of questioning accordingly. Charles tapped a finger on the table. Then who followed him? Who realized he'd found the real one? Agatha didn't answer aloud, but her mind circled the possibilities. Linton? Someone Hardwick lectured? Someone who wanted it buried, literally or figuratively? Her tea suddenly tasted weak. She slammed the spoon down. "I'm going to Bill." "As punishment?" Charles asked. "As consultation." Bill Wong was at the station, flipping through paperwork with the patience of a saint and the posture of a man who had slept poorly. He brightened slightly when Agatha strode in, brightened then braced, which was the natural order of things with her. "Bill, I've solved it," she announced. "Of course you have," he said calmly. "What have you solved today?" "After the swap. That's why the resin was on his hands. Doris saw him touching my clasp, and then someone confronted him later." Bill tapped his pen. "Interesting theory, and plausible." "Plausible?" Agatha cried. "It's practically proven." Bill smiled gently. "Agatha, everything is practically proven in your mind if it irritates you enough." She huffed. "Well, it should irritate you too. You're the detective." "Yes," Bill said, "and I have something for you. Lab results." He slid a file across the desk. Agatha opened it. The words leapt out. "Traces of botanical resin, likely derived from natural amber. Present near mouth and fingers. Possible ingestion. Further toxicity analysis pending." Agatha stared. "Ingestion?" Bill nodded. "He had resin in his mouth. Not enough to be corrosive or poisonous on its own, but the type suggests he may have touched something coated in amber resin and then—" He hesitated delicately, licked his fingers. Agatha recoiled. That man was disgusting. "Or careless," Bill said. "Some resins are used in preservation, others in adhesives. If he handled something sticky—" "Like the real amulet," Agatha finished. "Hardwick was always touching things he shouldn't." Bill looked thoughtful. "We also found faint traces around his lips, enough to confirm contact, not enough to explain the collapse. The doctor believes stress or shock played a larger role." Agatha sat back. Something prickled at the edges of her thinking. So, he handled the amulet, and then he died before he could gloat about it. Someone saw him take it. "Perhaps," Bill said, "but we don't know who, or why." "Well, it wasn't me," Agatha snapped. "I was too busy trying not to throttle Doris." "Your alibi is tragically believable," Bill said warmly. Then his expression softened. "Just be cautious, Agatha. If someone wanted that amulet badly enough to confront Hardwick—" "They won't scare me," Agatha said firmly. Bill sighed. "I know." Leaving the station, Agatha walked briskly toward the village green. Her thoughts tangled in 100 threads, but one strand held firm. Vanity. Her vanity. She had stood proudly wearing that necklace, imagining admiration, and instead she'd been wearing a fake while Hardwick handled the real thing behind her back. A flush heated her cheeks. Charles appeared beside her, as though summoned by humiliation alone. "You're walking fast," he observed. "I'm furious," she replied. "With yourself?" "Don't be absurd. With the universe." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Charles said, "You did nothing foolish." Agatha snorted. "I walked around flaunting counterfeit jewelry." "You believed it was real." "That's hardly reassuring," Charles smiled. "It looked good." She stopped. "Charles, this is not the time for compliments that sound like insults." "Then I'll give you a straightforward one," he said. "You're closer to the truth than anyone else." Agatha blinked. "Well, yes, obviously." Charles laughed. Before she could retort, Doris Simpson appeared again, as though the devil had rung a little bell. "Mrs. Raisin," Doris said, hands on hips. "I have a question." "How unfortunate," Agatha murmured. Doris continued anyway. "Did Hardwick say anything to you when he grabbed your necklace? Anything unusual?" Agatha bristled. Everything he said was unusual. That was his entire personality. Doris sniffed. "He muttered something like 'finally' when he touched it." Agatha froze. "Finally?" "That's what it sounded like. And then he looked smug." Doris folded her arms. "Frankly, I thought you'd snap the chain yourself to avoid further embarrassment." Agatha made a strangled sound. "Doris, if I ever snap something, it won't be jewelry." Doris, sensing danger, retreated with unusual speed. Charles looked intrigued. If he said "finally," that means he'd been searching for the real amulet for a long time. Agatha nodded, heart quickening. And he found it. On me, during that moment. But why on you? Charles asked. Agatha shook her head. No idea, but he swapped it. He must have. Which means the real one was somewhere close enough for him to retrieve without anyone noticing. They both fell quiet, the question hovering like a fog. Where had he hidden it? And who noticed him retrieving it? Agatha exhaled sharply. I need to think, and I can't think with Doris squeaking at me. Charles smiled. Home, then? Yes, she said. Hodge is more helpful. At home, Agatha closed the door and leaned against it. The cottage felt warm, familiar, and deliciously free of Doris. Hodge appeared instantly, tail high, as though welcoming a queen returning from battle. He padded over and tapped her ankle with a soft paw. Agatha scooped him up. You are the only creature in this village who doesn't second-guess me. Hodge purred loudly, curling into her arms like a furry loaf of affirmation. She carried him to the sitting room, stroking the soft fur under his chin. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen, an automatic comfort she hadn't realized she needed. Hardwick found the real amulet, she murmured. And someone knew he had it, someone who wanted it more. Hodge blinked sleepily. Agatha set him down gently as he curled into a warm circle on the rug. We'll find it, she whispered, and we'll find who followed him. Hodge sighed, content, and closed his eyes. The cottage settled into evening quiet, the perfect ironic contrast to the storm brewing in Agatha's mind. Don't you dare touch the custard slices, Doris. They're for later. That was Agatha's opening salvo as she entered the W.I. hall, arms full of floral napkins she had no intention of folding. Doris Simpson, already hovering over the tea table like a vulture awaiting a weakened hiker, recoiled as though accused of treason. I was merely checking their stability, Doris said primly. You check nothing without nibbling, Agatha retorted. Consider this an intervention. A few W.I. members tittered behind their cups. A W.I. tea was supposed to be a soothing affair. China cups, scones, gentle conversation. But today tension buzzed like a mosquito at bedtime. Everyone had come expecting gossip, scandal, or ideally both. The village's resident murder-adjacent trouble magnate, Agatha Raisin, had promised tea and a discussion. That alone guaranteed attendance. Mrs. Blocksby approached with her usual quiet grace. Agatha, dear, perhaps we tone things down a little. I am perfectly toned, Agatha said, though she lowered her voice a fraction. This meeting is important. Mrs. Blocksby smiled. Everything feels important when you're involved. Agatha chose to interpret that as flattery. Tables were arranged in a welcoming semicircle, though half the women sat leaning subtly forward like theatre patrons anticipating the second act. On the far side, Marianne Linton, Edgar's niece, poured tea with an unsteady hand. Agatha noticed the tremor immediately. She thought, nervous or guilty? The distinction mattered. Once everyone was seated, Agatha stood clearing her throat with what she hoped was authoritative poise. Ladies, she began, I've arranged this tea because recent events have created confusion, and confusion leads to rumour, and rumour, Doris cut in, rumour leads to moral decline. Agatha closed her eyes briefly. I was going to say chaos, Doris, but thank you for your contribution. A ripple of amusement fluttered around the room. Agatha continued, As many of you know, a man died outside this hall days ago. The circumstances remain unclear, but we now have evidence suggesting he handled something sticky. That sounds filthy, murmured Mrs. Mason. Agatha forged ahead. Amber resin, the sort used in preservation, the sort associated with... Marianne Linton's teacup clattered violently into its saucer. Every head turned. Sorry, Marianne whispered. Clumsy. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Clumsy was one thing, ghostly pale and sweating was another. She softened her voice. Are you all right, Marianne? Yes, Marianne said too quickly. Completely. Quite. Yes. Agatha's suspicion sharpened. She was not one for subtle psychological observation, but even she could smell discomfort. She resumed. As I was saying, amber resin is commonly found on old artifacts. Marianne made a small, strangled sound. Agatha's gaze slid toward Mrs. Blocksby, who met it calmly and gave a tiny, knowing nod. This was why Agatha valued her. Quiet insight wrapped in kind eyes. Doris, sensing attention drifting from her, sniffed loudly. Well, All I know is that cursed jewellery caused havoc. Nothing is cursed, Agatha snapped, except your attitude. That earned a few smothered laughs. You didn't see the state of him, Doris insisted. Dead as a doornail, face all contorted in... Doris, Mrs. Bloxby said softly, let's not dramatise. Doris sat back, chastened but not defeated. Agatha folded her arms. Right. Now, important question. Does anyone here know anything about amber preservation or restoration of church items? A silence followed. Cups clinked. Someone coughed. Then, reluctantly, Marianne raised her hand. Oh, Agatha said innocently. You're familiar with restoration work? A little, Marianne said. Her voice wavered like a faulty wireless signal. I helped restore a few church pieces years ago, nothing recent. But you know how resin is used, Agatha pressed. Marianne swallowed. Yes, it seals cracks, protects surfaces, makes things glossy again. Agatha leaned forward slightly. Hardwick had resin on his hands and lips. He must have touched something recently preserved. Marianne's face drained further. Lots of people use resin. True, Agatha said lightly, but not lots of people panicked when I mentioned it. A flash of defensiveness stiffened Marianne's shoulders. I panicked because you're implying things. Dangerous things. I haven't implied anything yet, Agatha said, but thank you for volunteering your anxiety. Mrs. Mason whispered loudly. She looks guilty to me. Mrs. Mason, Mrs. Bloxby said firmly, we don't accuse without reason. Agatha returned her attention to Marianne. Did Hardwick speak to you recently? Marianne hesitated. Not really. He came by Uncle's house once, wanted to ask about old artefacts stored in the church loft. Uncle refused him entry. Because of the dispute? Agatha asked. Yes, Uncle can hold a grudge like no one else. Marianne bit her lip. Hardwick always made us feel small. Agatha watched her carefully. Marianne wasn't lying. She was flustered, frightened but not deceitful. So why the panic? Agatha softened her tone again. Did you restore anything for Hardwick, or help him, even unintentionally? No, Marianne said, almost too loudly. Absolutely not. Agatha nodded slowly. Not guilty then, just hiding something tangential. A personal fear perhaps, not a criminal one. Still the reaction was telling. She switched tactics. Ladies, Hardwick handled the real amulet. We know this now. He swapped my replica the night of the event, and someone must have seen him retrieve it. A murmur passed through the WI like wind through reeds. Doris sniffed. Why would he swap them? Yours was perfectly garish. It was a fake, Agatha said. Gasps erupted across the room. Fake, Mrs. Mason repeated. But it looked so. Authentic, Agatha finished, voice dripping with disdain. Yes, I was duped. Humiliating, I assure you. Doris perked up. I knew something was off. It clashed terribly with your top. Agatha closed her eyes. This tea is testing my will to live. Mrs. Bloxby stepped in again, her voice a balm. Ladies, perhaps we should focus on what matters. If someone did see Mr. Hardwick take the amulet, that person may be frightened to come forward. Agatha nodded. Exactly. And fear is more corrosive than resin. Doris muttered. Depends on the resin. Agatha ignored her. Instead, she set her teacup down with deliberate calm. I believe someone here knows more than they're saying. Marianne choked softly but waved a hand. Not me. I didn't say it was you, Agatha replied, but interesting reaction. Mrs. Mason leaned forward. If someone did see something, they should tell the police. Yes, Agatha said, but people often tell me first. A predictable chorus of agreement rose. Agatha often served as Carsley's unofficial confessional booth. My door is open, she added, wide open. Figuratively. Doris sniffed. Figuratively? Last time it was literally open, the postman glimpsed your unwashed dishes. Agatha launched into a glare so vicious half the WI shrank back. Doris, however, remained unbothered. Before Agatha could retort, Marianne stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. I must go, she said, suddenly remembered something important. No cake? Mrs. Mason asked, scandalized. No, Marianne squeaked, already heading for the door. Sorry. The hall watched her flee as though she were a startled deer. Agatha waited exactly 5 seconds before muttering, Well, that wasn't suspicious at all. Mrs. Bloxby rested a gentle hand on her arm. Agatha, she's anxious. Don't push too harshly. Softly, softly, catchy murderer, Agatha muttered. Bill Wong entered the hall just then as though summoned by the tension. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but Agatha, we need to talk. Agatha straightened. Good news or bad? New lab results came in this morning, Bill said quietly. Evidence of a toxic compound, Bill said carefully. The word dropped like a stone into a silent lake. Poisoning? Doris shrieked. I knew it! The curse! There is no curse, Agatha snapped. Bill? Resin-based compound, Bill said quietly. Toxic if ingested in enough concentration. Not fatal on its own, but dangerous. Agatha's breath hitched. So Hardwick didn't just collapse. No, Bill said. Someone wanted him silenced. A thrill of vindication and dread curled through Agatha. The WI hall erupted in whispers. Doris fanned herself dramatically. Mrs. Mason demanded reassurance that her scones were safe. Mrs. Bloxby gave Agatha a calm, steady look. Agatha exhaled. Then the mistake was assuming fear ended with the truth. Later, at home, Agatha kicked off her heels and slumped onto the sofa. Her mind buzzed. Resin, poisoning, Marianne's panic, Hardwick's muttering, the missing amulet. Hodge padded over, hopped onto her lap with regal entitlement, and circled twice before settling. She stroked him absently. Everyone's hiding something, darling. Hodge blinked slowly, then nestled deeper into her skirt. Fine, she whispered. We'll dig it all out. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen, filling the cottage with soft, domestic warmth, a gentle counterpoint to the sharp mysteries gathering around her. Marianne Linton, Agatha declared, you're going to talk to me if I have to chase you through every hedgerow in Carsley. That was how Agatha opened as she marched up the path to Edgar Linton's cottage. Marianne, who had fled the WIT like a startled pheasant, now stood frozen halfway to the gate, clutching a wicker basket as though it might shield her from questioning. Agatha, she stammered, I was just bringing Uncle some groceries. Wonderful, Agatha said. He can eat later. We're talking now. Marianne looked around wildly as though hoping Mrs. Bloxby might suddenly appear and mediate. Alas, only Agatha's fierce determination occupied the lane. Agatha planted herself squarely in front of her. You panicked yesterday when I mentioned resin. You nearly fainted. Women don't swoon over adhesives unless they've something to hide. Marianne's lower lip trembled. I didn't swoon. You rattled like a teacup on a lorry, Agatha corrected. So, resin, explain. Marianne's shoulders sagged. She leaned against the gate and shut her eyes, gathering herself. When she opened them again, something resigned flickered behind the panic. It was meant to frighten him, she whispered, not hurt him. Agatha felt an electric jolt. She stepped closer, voice dropping. Frighten who? Hardwick, Marianne said. I only wanted to give him a scare. He'd been tormenting Uncle for months. He insulted Uncle's work, called him senile, said our family had ruined archaeology with our provincial emotions. Agatha nodded grimly. That sounds like him. Marianne swallowed. I've been restoring bits of the old church collection, old wooden panels, cracked icons, that sort of thing. Resin is used in the sealing process. Sticky stuff, gets everywhere. I always kept gloves on, but I also kept a small jar of untreated resin flakes. And you did what with them? Agatha asked softly. I coated a cloth with them, Marianne said. Just a light coating. I thought if he touched it, he'd get sticky fingers, enough to make him drop something valuable or at least ruin his notes, something to bruise his pride. Agatha blinked. You attacked an academic using arts and crafts sabotage? Marianne flushed. It wasn't an attack. It was just petty revenge. I left the cloth on the church loft table because Hardwick kept poking around there when no one wanted him to. I assumed he'd grab it while yelling about improper storage. Agatha rubbed her forehead. Marianne, he died. I know, Marianne cried, voice cracking. I didn't mean it. The resin wasn't poisonous like that. Not lethal. I thought it would just irritate him. Agatha's tone gentled. Did you see him take it? Marianne nodded miserably. I was sorting hymnals downstairs. I heard him stomping about above. I peeked up the ladder. I saw him grab the cloth and wipe his hands. Then he muttered something about finally proving everyone wrong. Then he left, clutching something to his chest. Agatha inhaled sharply. The real amulet. I suppose, Marianne whispered. I didn't see it. Just the way he held something close. I was too frightened to confront him. And then, That night, he died. Fear shuddered through her. Agatha placed a hand on her arm. Marianne, resin alone wouldn't kill him. Bill said so. But what if I triggered it? Marianne whispered. What if he had an allergy? What if he licked his fingers? He always licked his fingers to turn pages. I saw him do it in Uncle's living room. Agatha grimaced. Yes, that habit was noted. Marianne pressed both hands to her face. I thought I'd killed him. That's why I panicked. That's why I ran out of the WIT. I couldn't breathe. I thought everyone could see it on me. Agatha softened. Guilt doesn't equal guiltiness. Hardwick had plenty of enemies and no sense of self-preservation. He was careless. Your intention matters. Marianne dropped her hands and looked at her with a trembling sort of hope. Do you believe me? Yes, Agatha said. And more importantly, Mrs. Bloxby will believe you. And if Mrs. Bloxby believes you, God himself falls in line. A fragile smile flickered across Marianne's face. Come, Agatha said. We're going to Bill. Marianne paled again. Must we? If you don't, Doris will find out, and then we'll all die of exhaustion explaining it, Agatha said. Trust me, Bill is the gentlest option. Bill Wong listened quietly, expression thoughtful rather than accusing. Marianne twisted a handkerchief until it resembled a damp rope. So, Bill said at last, you handled Raisin. Hardwick touched Raisin. That much we know. Marianne nodded, shaking. But the concentration we found was too low to kill, Bill continued. It likely irritated his mouth or skin. It may have worsened stress, but it wasn't poison in the intentional sense. Marianne sagged with relief, then stiffened again. So, what happens now? Bill folded his hands. We still have a death that may have been influenced by your actions. Not deliberate, but relevant. I'm going to need a formal statement. Marianne looked terrified. Agatha stepped forward. Bill, she didn't mean harm. I know, he said gently, but law cares about facts, not feelings. Marianne gripped her chair. Will I be arrested? Not today, Bill said softly, but I must document everything. That's how we protect the innocent. Agatha gave Marianne a reassuring nod. You tell the truth. He'll see it. Bill shot Agatha a grateful glance. This helps the case, actually. It narrows the timeline and confirms Hardwick handled something restored or tampered with shortly before his death. Marianne whispered. I'm so sorry. No need for apology to me, Bill said, but the situation is still serious. Marianne looked ready to crumple. Agatha guided her up. Come on, Mrs. Bloxby will make tea. The sort that undoes emotional catastrophe. Do stay nearby, Bill added to Agatha. I'll need to speak with you again. You always do, Agatha replied. Outside the station, the air felt cool and sharp. Not that Agatha noticed more than the tension humming in her ribs. She didn't kill him, Agatha murmured. She just triggered the wrong chain of events. That doesn't make it less awful, Marianne whispered. No, Agatha agreed, but guilt is heavy enough without adding crimes you didn't commit. They walked toward the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby greeted Marianne with such gentle understanding that the younger woman broke into tears instantly. Mrs. Bloxby enveloped her like a mother hen who specialized in emotional crisis management. Agatha watched, appreciating again how the vicar's wife possessed a sort of holy magic unavailable to the rest of the village. When Marianne was settled, Agatha stepped aside with Mrs. Bloxby. She didn't mean harm, Agatha murmured. I know, Mrs. Bloxby said softly. People often do wrong things for right reasons, or frightened reasons. Agatha nodded. She was trying to protect Edgar. Loyalty and fear make strong companions, Mrs. Bloxby said. Let us hope truth makes stronger ones. Agatha felt a pang of what she didn't know. Sympathy, perhaps, or a reminder that her own loyalty sometimes marched her into trouble. Mrs. Bloxby offered a small, sad smile. You did well bringing her in. Agatha straightened. Praise from Mrs. Bloxby was rare and precious. Someone had to. Mrs. Bloxby guided Marianne inside for tea and quiet conversation. Agatha headed home, her steps brisk, thoughts tangled. Marianne hadn't intended harm. Hardwick had handled the real amulet. And someone else, someone with sharper purpose, had stepped into the shadows of that night. She reached her cottage, unlocked the door, and slipped inside. The warm, familiar smell of home wrapped around her. Hodge trotted up, tail aloft, scolding her with a decisive meow for returning later than expected. Oh, hush, Agatha said, scooping him into her arms. "You weren't the one interrogating artisans and saving panicked nieces." Hodge chirped in faint disapproval, but allowed himself to be carried to the sofa. Agatha sat stroking his back as his purr began, reluctantly at first, then steady and reassuring. "Well, darling," she murmured, "it wasn't murder by Raisin. It was something far nastier." Hodge blinked, unimpressed by human complexity. Agatha leaned back as the kettle clicked off in the kitchen, filling the cottage with its soft domestic punctuation. "And now Bill prepares an arrest," she whispered, "but for the wrong person." Hodge stretched luxuriously, then curled into a warm comma against her hip. Agatha stared ahead, eyes narrowing. "Time to find the right one." "Agatha, don't glare at me like that. I'm not the Crown Prosecution Service." Bill Wong stood in her doorway, arms folded, expression patient in the way only a man long acquainted with Agatha Raisin could manage. She glared anyway. "I'm allowed to glare," Agatha huffed. "You're about to arrest a girl whose only crime was having an emotional pulse." Bill sighed. "No one is marching anyone off in chains. Marianne will give a full statement. Then the CPS will decide whether accidental involvement constitutes negligence." Agatha flung herself onto the sofa. "Negligence? She dropped resin, Bill. Resin! Honestly, half the WI got more dangerous substances under their nails making chutney." Hodge, disturbed by the volume, padded in and hopped beside her, giving Bill a pointed stare as though accusing him of ruining the household peace. Bill crouched to scratch Hodge's head. "You are not helping," he murmured at the cat. Agatha crossed her arms. Marianne didn't poison him. Hardwick basically poisoned himself through sheer unhygienic living. Bill straightened. Intent matters, but effect matters too. Someone died shortly after contacting a substance she knowingly placed to cause distress. Even if her intention wasn't harmful, it's legally messy. Agatha made a dismissive sound. "Hardwick's whole life was messy. I don't see why the village should pay for his inability to behave like a human being." Bill gave her a long, level look. "Agatha, laws exist whether or not we like them." "Oh, how dreary," she muttered. "I preferred when you spent your days trying to stop me interfering." "I still do," Bill said, just with less optimism. She couldn't help smiling, a little. By late afternoon, Carsley had reached full gossip saturation. The Red Lion buzzed like a disturbed hive, though everyone spoke in hushed voices, as if whispering transformed speculation into moral diplomacy. "Poor Marianne," Mrs. Mason declared dramatically. "Such a delicate girl. Always looked like she needed a good lie down." "She needs a solicitor, not a lie down," muttered Bert Jessup. Doris Simpson sniffed loudly over her half-pint. "Well, if you go about frightening people with chemicals, you must expect consequences." "You frightened us for years with your lemon curd," Agatha told her. Doris turned purple. Roy Silver burst through the pub door in a swirl of scarves and melodrama. "Agatha, tell me everything. The papers will adore a tragic artisan heroine wronged by academia." "She is not a tragic heroine," Agatha snapped, "and we are not pitching anything to the tabloids." Roy placed a manicured hand over his heart. "I'm protecting her narrative." "You're manufacturing a narrative," Agatha corrected, "which is worse." Roy slid onto the bench beside her. "Darling, if the village is dividing between outrage and pity, someone ought to provide a third option: glamour." Bill, who had just entered behind him, said, "Roy, if you glamorize an active police investigation, I'll staple you to a filing cabinet." Roy beamed. "How you talk." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Bill, do you really think Marianne will be charged?" Bill looked tired. "Possibly. Possibly not. CPS decisions are rarely predictable. But I don't think she's a danger, and I told her as much." Agatha felt her chest loosen slightly. "She's frightened." "She is," Bill agreed. "But fear isn't guilt, and if this was a tragic accident born of frustration, the law will take that into account." Roy patted Agatha's hand. "Oh, Aggie, you're worrying like a mother hen, quite unbecoming." "I'll unbecome you in a minute," she snapped. Charles appeared then, as though drawn by irritation alone. "What's the latest?" he asked, sliding into the booth. "Agatha is saving the innocent again," Roy announced. "I'm ensuring justice is not stupid," Agatha corrected. Bill exhaled. "Everyone calm down. There's still the matter of Hardwick's final movements. Someone followed him. Someone confronted him. We need that person." Charles glanced at Agatha. You have something in mind? Of course, Agatha said. The truth is slipping out. People crack when they're frightened. Doris sniffed again. Well, if you ask me, no one did, Agatha said. Doris clamped her mouth shut, though her expression promised future disapproval. Bill leaned forward. I've arranged a final round of interviews, all key individuals, including a few who've been suspiciously quiet. Agatha's pulse quickened. When? Tomorrow morning, Bill said, at the station. Roy clasped his hands dramatically. A confrontation! How thrilling! This isn't theatre, Bill snapped. It could be, Roy said, with lighting. Agatha pushed back her chair. Right, enough speculation. Bill, I'll be there. Agatha, Bill groaned, you are not conducting this. You are simply attending, quietly, preferably without commentary. Agatha smirked. You can prefer anything you like. Bill looked skyward in mute suffering. Back home, Agatha kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the sofa. Hodge trotted over, jumped up and head-butted her chin before curling in her lap with practiced entitlement. She stroked him absently, mind buzzing with possibilities, resentment, rivalry, academic pride, village grudges. Accidents become crimes, she murmured, and crimes begin as accidents, or so people think. Hodge, entirely untroubled by moral nuance, stretched luxuriously before settling again, purring into her skirt. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen, filling the cottage with warm, familiar quiet. Agatha closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she whispered, we find out who pushed Hardwick past an accident. Hodge blinked once, slowly, as though granting approval. Everyone sit down and stop rustling biscuits, Agatha commanded. We are going to clear this up before Doris starts a village rebellion. That snapped the WI Hall into silence. Doris Simpson, already poised for righteous commentary, froze mid-rustle, hand guiltily hovering over the shortbread tin. Agatha seized the moment and stepped to the front. Now that we know what happened, Agatha said, we decide what we do with it, she said. At this hall, at that table, with Hardwick looming over us like a sanctimonious goose. Gasps, a few nods. Even Mrs. Mason murmured, Sanctimonious is generous. Agatha continued crisply. He mocked my necklace. Fair enough, it was a fake. But then he touched it. Doris saw him fiddling with my clasp. All eyes swung to Doris. Doris flushed. Well, I did, but I assumed he was admiring my organizational skills. No one has ever admired your organizational skills, Agatha said, least of all a man who died moments later. Mrs. Bloxby cleared her throat gently, a reminder to keep things civil. Agatha adjusted. Point is, Hardwick was swapping the replica for the real amulet he'd located elsewhere. He needed proof for his grand book deal. He found it. He took it. Then he left. Murmurs swept the room. Agatha held up a hand. But he handled something else that night. Something sticky. Resin. Amber resin. Marianne? Marianne, seated beside Mrs. Bloxby, stiffened. Her eyes shone with fear but also relief, as though waiting for Judgment Day to finally arrive. Agatha softened her tone. Ladies, Marianne placed a harmlessly sticky cloth in the church loft to deter Hardwick from rummaging. It was petty, it was foolish, but it was not murderous. Marianne's breath hitched. Several WI members frowned sympathetically. Even Doris shifted uncomfortably. He touched it, Agatha said. Probably licked his fingers like the unhygienic man he was. Resin irritated him, but resin didn't kill him. Bill Wong stepped forward from the back where he'd been leaning. Miss Raisin is correct. The resin played a part, but it was not the fatal blow. Doris looked wounded. Then what did kill him? Agatha folded her arms. His own arrogance. He confronted someone that night, someone who realized he had recovered the real amulet, someone who feared exposure, someone who pushed him too hard in the heat of argument. The hall fell utterly still. Agatha let the silence stretch. Not dramatic, purposeful. An accident, she finished quietly. Complicated by fear, stress, and confrontation, but not murder. Mrs. Bloxby spoke softly. Marianne acted from fear and loyalty. Hardwick acted from pride, and the rest was misfortune. Marianne broke then, quiet, shaking sobs. Mrs. Bloxby wrapped an arm around her. Agatha turned to the hall. Marianne is not a criminal. She is not cursed, she is not wicked, she is someone who snapped under the weight of a bully. Roy Silver arrived late, slipping in like a brightly dressed ghost. Did I miss the confession? Sit down, Roy, Agatha said, preferably silently. Roy flopped into a chair. Tragic heroine, confirmed. Doris bristled. She frightened a man to death. No, Agatha corrected sharply. Hardwick frightened himself to death. He pushed, manipulated, humiliated, and finally provoked the wrong person. Marianne's cloth was incidental. Bill nodded. Her statement supports the forensic timeline. This is no longer a search for a murderer. It is a matter of legal classification, and the law will handle it rationally. Marianne wiped her eyes. I only wanted him to leave Uncle alone. And you should never be punished for protecting family, Mrs. Mason declared, surprisingly fierce. Agreement rippled across the room. Even Doris looked chastened, reluctant but chastened. Well, she muttered, if Mrs. Bloxby forgives her, then I suppose I might. Generous, Agatha said acidly. A miracle in beige. Doris pursed her lips but said nothing else. Agatha surveyed the hall. Ladies, the truth is out. No more whispers, no more speculation. Marianne has suffered enough. Mrs. Bloxby rose. Let us offer kindness now, not judgment. The W.I., fickle, dramatic, devoted to propriety, responded with a soft wave of nods. Chairs scraped gently as women moved toward Marianne, offering murmured comfort, sympathetic squeezes of her hands, and, naturally, cake. Roy leaned toward Agatha. You were magnificent, like a moral gladiator. I'm exhausted, Agatha muttered. Charles, who had slipped in beside her, offered a small smile. But right. Agatha ignored the tug of warmth that brought. Later at home, Agatha shut the cottage door behind her and exhaled deeply. Her shoulders, tight all day, finally softened. She towed off her shoes and collapsed into her favourite armchair. Hodge appeared instantly, tail high, as if reporting for emotional service. He leapt onto her lap, turned 3 circles, and settled like a warm loaf. Agatha stroked his back. Well, darling, justice is messier than murder sometimes. Hodge blinked, unimpressed with human dilemmas. Tomorrow we deal with the final aftermath, she murmured. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen. Steady, familiar. Hodge purred, settling deeper into her lap. Agatha let her eyes drift shut. For tonight, at least, the village was quiet. Agatha Raisin, you owe me an apology. That was Doris Simpson's opening bellow as Agatha stepped into the village shop the following morning. A lesser woman might have flinched. Agatha simply raised an eyebrow. For what? She asked coolly. Rescuing the village from ignorance. You're welcome, Doris huffed, for making me think you were in possession of a cursed artifact. Agatha snorted. Doris, you think tinned peaches are cursed if the label's crooked? A few shoppers choked back laughter behind the cereal display. Agatha felt some of her battered pride stitch itself back together. Mrs. Mason piped up from the butcher counter. Glad to hear it wasn't your fault, Agatha. We all said so. Doris glared. We did not. Mrs. Mason shrugged. Well, I did, and Alma did, and the vicar's wife said something very wise and soothing, so that counts as support. Agatha allowed herself a modest smile. She would never admit it aloud, but her reputation mattered to her more than she liked to admit. Being at the centre of a village scandal was thrilling when she was solving it, not when she was accidentally starring in it. Charles Frayth entered just then, wearing an amused expression as though he'd been listening from outside. Ah, he said, I see Carsley has returned to its usual morning sport, blaming Agatha for everything that isn't nailed down. Everything is nailed down, Doris muttered. Well, Charles countered cheerfully, nails tremble in her presence. Agatha shot him a look. Are you attempting flattery or mockery? A blend, he replied. You wear it well. Agatha felt heat prickle her cheeks. She turned toward the dairy section with unnecessary interest. I survived public humiliation, Charles. I'm not undone by yogurt. He followed her. You're remarkably resilient, you know. Don't be sentimental, she said sharply. I'm not, he said. I'm observant. Your reputation took a hit, everyone whispered, and yet here you stand, picking out milk like a warrior queen. Agatha lifted a carton. Warriors prefer semi-skimmed. Charles laughed, warm and maddening. Come on, you know you've come out of this looking rather impressive. Impressive? Agatha scoffed. I publicly flaunted a fake necklace. Yes, Charles said, but you also solved a case the police struggled with, comforted the frightened, and restored village equilibrium. The necklace is irrelevant." Agatha blinked. "You really think so?" "I really do." There it was again, that gentle sincerity she despised precisely because it worked. She turned away before Roy sighed. "You're no fun." "I am tremendous fun," she replied, "just not headline fun." "Fine," Roy said, "but do know you are, in spirit, centre stage." She hung up, feeling rather pleased. At home she found Bill Wong waiting on her doorstep, hands in his pockets, expression sheepish. "Agatha," he began, "I wanted to say thank you. Your push helped Marianne tell the truth." Agatha waved this off. She needed someone with force. "You are very forceful," Bill agreed diplomatically. He hesitated. "The CPS may still take some interest, but I've recommended leniency. She didn't intend harm." "Of course she didn't," Agatha said. "Hardwick was a disaster waiting to happen. Anyone could have nudged him." Bill smiled faintly. "And just so you know, your name is entirely clear." Agatha felt another stitch of pride repair itself. "Good." "And," Bill added, "if it helps, quite a few villagers told me they were relieved you were involved. They trust you." Agatha blinked. "They do?" "Yes," Bill said softly, "even when they pretend otherwise." He left her with that thought, and for once it warmed rather than embarrassed her. Inside, Hodge greeted her with an imperious meow, as though demanding to know whether her reputation had been satisfactorily restored. She scooped him up. "Partially, darling, slightly repaired, not perfect." Hodge stretched across her arms like a smug fur scarf. Agatha set him down and made tea, letting the familiar rhythm soothe her. Kettle boil, cup warm, steam rising. The elegant simplicity of a village day returned to normal. She sat, Hodge hopping onto her lap within seconds. "Well," she murmured, stroking his ears, "I survived the humiliation. I solved the case, and I'm still standing." Hodge purred approvingly. Agatha leaned back, letting the quiet cottage embrace her. Outside, Carsley moved on. Scandal resolved, balance restored. Her pride still smarted. It would for days. But her reputation, slightly repaired indeed. And perhaps, she thought with a small secret smile, that was enough. "Absolutely not," declared Bert Jessup, banging the church vestry table with unnecessary force. "We are not reopening that dig. Nothing good ever comes from digging up old things." Agatha, who had only just sat down, muttered, "Speak for yourself. I've rediscovered old jeans that did wonders for my hips." The vicar coughed delicately. Mrs. Bloxby's lips twitched in mild amusement. The emergency parish meeting had been called to discuss Hardwick's original proposal to revisit the 70s excavation site. Now that the scandal had settled and the real amulet remained missing, a few academically inclined villagers wanted to carry on his work, but the majority did not. "We can't stir up ancient nonsense again," Bert insisted. "The 70s were chaotic enough." "Only because you fell into the trench," Mrs. Mason reminded him. "That was sabotage," Bert grumbled. "Or clumsiness. Possibly both." Agatha surveyed the group. Hardwick was hunting notoriety, not history. He upset everyone and left chaos behind. If there's anything of value still buried, maybe it's best left that way. The room hummed with uneasy agreement. One elderly parishioner raised a trembling hand. "Some things belong to the past. The church should preserve peace, not disturb it." Mrs. Bloxby nodded gently. "The purpose of remembrance is honour, not disruption. If a dig causes harm, it becomes its own mistake." Agatha watched the room soften under her influence. Mrs. Bloxby possessed the rare ability to soothe even the prickliest tempers, Doris Simpson included. Doris sniffed dramatically. "Well, I never liked the idea of men with spades traipsing about our graves." Agatha smirked. "You barely like men with teacups." Doris ignored her. The vicar folded his hands. "Let us vote. Reopen the excavation, or officially retire the matter." The vote was swift, unanimous. Even the academically curious surrendered to communal peacekeeping. The excavation would remain closed. Agatha felt something unclench inside her. Oddly, protecting the amulet's mystery, rather than exposing it, felt right. Mrs. Bloxby caught her eye, smiling softly. "Not everything needs to be solved, Agatha." Agatha frowned. "I prefer things solved." "Yes," Mrs. Bloxby said warmly, "but sometimes leaving a story where it rests is an act of kindness." Agatha wasn't sure she liked that, but she respected it. The meeting adjourned, chairs scraped, parishioners ambled out into the afternoon light, gossip already blooming in gentle, relieved ripples. The whole village seemed to exhale the lingering tension of the investigation. Charles caught up with Agatha as she left the vestry. "Well," he said, "Carsley returns to its peaceful slumber." "Peaceful?" Agatha scoffed. "Doris is already plotting to take over the flower rota again." "She was born plotting," Charles replied. "It keeps her youthful." Agatha allowed herself a tight smile. "I thought they'd want answers." "They do," Charles said, "but not at the cost of calm. The amulet was never the treasure. They were. Their quiet, predictable village life." Agatha stared at him. "Since when are you poetic?" "Since you dragged me through half of Gloucestershire chasing historians," he said cheerfully. "Trauma changes a man." She rolled her eyes. "Idiot." "You're idiot," he said, strolling ahead before she could react. She followed at a slower pace, considering everything left unsaid. The case was done, not neatly tied, not perfectly satisfying, but settled. Marianne would face minor consequences, not ruin. The village would heal. The amulet, wherever it lay, would not trouble them again. Mrs. Blocksby appeared beside Agatha as if conjured. "You look thoughtful." "I hate feeling thoughtful," Agatha said. "It usually means I'm developing character." Mrs. Blocksby laughed. "You did good, Agatha, truly." Agatha flushed. Praise from Mrs. Blocksby was rare and uncomfortably warming. "I suppose I did," she muttered. Mrs. Blocksby clasped her hands. "Some truths, and some relics, are not meant to be unearthed. Let them rest." Agatha gave a grudging nod. "Fine, but if someone finds that amulet, I fully reserve the right to say, 'I told you so.'" "I would expect nothing less." They parted at the lane, Agatha heading home. Inside her cottage, she slipped off her shoes and dropped onto the sofa. Hodge ambled in with deliberate self-importance, hopped up beside her, and head-butted her arm as if saying, "Well, heroine again?" Agatha scratched behind his ears. "Your mother prevented historical mayhem today. Try to act impressed." Hodge blinked, unimpressed but affectionate. He curled into a warm, purring bundle against her side. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen. Soft, final, reassuring. Agatha let her head fall back. "What remains buried," she murmured, "can stay buried." Hodge responded by settling even more heavily onto her lap, anchoring her to the quiet peace of her cottage, exactly where she belonged. Roy Silver breezed through briefly, then vanished again, leaving Agatha in blessed quiet. Hodge, who had been dozing in regal indifference, opened one eye and immediately closed it again. Even he refused to encourage Roy's theatrics. Agatha crossed her arms. "You're wasted everywhere. It's part of your charm." Roy pressed a hand to his chest. "I bring glamour to your rural gloom, and this is the thanks I get." "You brought noise," Agatha corrected. "Glamour is still pending." Roy sniffed dramatically. "Well, London calls. A producer is simply begging me to consult on a heritage documentary. Very tasteful, very serious. Naturally, they need me." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "And you're going?" "Must I remain in danger of becoming wholesome? No, thank you." Roy scooped up his scarf. "But I will say this, Aggie. Your amulet fiasco kept my social calendar alive for weeks. You should embroil yourself in academic scandals more often." "I'll embroil you in something in a minute," Agatha muttered. Roy blew her a kiss, bent to pat Hodge, who dodged expertly, and breezed out of the cottage with his usual hurricane flair. Silence returned like a grateful houseguest. Agatha allowed herself a small smile. Roy's departures were always dramatic, but he meant well. Mostly. She was still smiling when Charles Frayth appeared at the door, leaning with lazy elegance. "Is he finally gone?" "You missed him by seconds," Agatha said. "Tragic for you, delightful for me." Charles stepped inside without waiting for invitation as usual. "I thought I'd check you weren't suffering withdrawal. Roy's energy can be potent." "I'm hardy," Agatha replied. "I survived London PR. I can handle Roy." Charles surveyed her with amused fondness. "You look lighter today." "Do I?" She fussed with her hair. Perhaps the parish decision helped. No more amulet nonsense. "And your reputation?" Agatha bristled. "What about my reputation?" "Restored," Charles said. "Or at least, returned to its usual state. Half feared, half adored." She pretended to scoff, but warmth crept up her neck. Charles moved closer, hands tucked in his pockets. You could return to London, you know. Real cases, real clients, people who don't argue about jam. And leave all this? Agatha gestured around the cottage. The WI would fall apart without someone to terrify them. Charles smiled. So, you're choosing Carsley again. Agatha hesitated. She thought of Roy's glittering fantasies, of the city lights she once adored, of the bustle she used to crave. Then she glanced at the worn rug, the familiar armchair, the crooked picture she never quite straightened, and the faint sound of Hodge scratching his post in the next room. Yes, she said finally, I choose Carsley. Charles nodded as though he'd known all along. Good. Someone has to keep Doris in line. That woman could undo civilization, Agatha replied. They shared a comfortable quiet. Charles eventually straightened. I should head off. There's only so much emotional sincerity I can manage in one day. Coward, he grinned. You're coward. And with that typical breezy arrogance, he slipped out the door. Agatha remained standing, unsure how much of that comment he meant. She wasn't entirely sure how much she wished he did. She moved to the window, watching Charles stroll toward his car with the casual grace of a man who had never known worry in his life. He waved once, just fingers lazy and warm, before driving off. Agatha shut the door and sighed. London dreams, she murmured. Village realities. And perhaps, she thought, the village realities suited her better than she dared admit. Hodge padded into the room, tail high, demanding presents and food in equal measure. He head-butted her shin with unhidden expectation. Oh, fine, Agatha said. I'll feed you first. You're worse than Roy. Hodge purred triumphantly. She filled his bowl, then made a cup of tea for herself. The kettle clicked off with a tidy finality that seemed to settle the entire house. Agatha sat, watching Hodge devour his meal with determined greed. Traitor, she muttered affectionately. When he finished, he hopped into her lap without hesitation, warm, heavy, and smug, and curled into a perfect furry comma. Agatha stroked his back, feeling the soft rise and fall of his breath. Carsley. Tea. A quiet evening. Charles's words echoing faintly. Yes, she thought. She'd chosen correctly. The firelight softened. Hodge settled deeper. Agatha closed her eyes. For once everything felt precisely where it belonged. Hodge, get off my chair this instant. Agatha stood in the doorway of her sitting room, arms planted on her hips. Hodge sprawled luxuriously across her favourite armchair as though posing for a portrait, opened one eye and offered a slow, insolent blink. Oh, don't pretend you're deaf, she huffed. Hodge stretched, displaying a level of feline self-satisfaction that suggested he had absolutely no intention of moving. Agatha sighed, snatched a cushion from the sofa, and dropped into the second-best chair, lumpier, older, and positioned at a slightly irritating angle. Typical, she thought. Even my cat treats me like hired help. The room felt unusually still, the quiet sort that began to settle after a case concluded, the hum of gossip fading, the last threads of drama tied off, the village drifting back into its habitual rhythms. Agatha was accustomed to these moments, equal parts relief and restlessness. She picked up a match, struck it, and lit a cigarette with a small, deliberate inhale. Just one, she murmured. A victory cigarette. Hodge flicked an ear, unimpressed by either her restraint or her triumph. Agatha gazed into the fire, watching the flames pulse amber and gold. Fitting, really, considering the ridiculous necklace that had caused half her recent humiliation. Beauty, mystery, danger, scandal, and in the end, rather less magical than she had hoped. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Before she could rise, the door opened slightly and Mrs. Bloxby stepped in, smiling with her usual quiet warmth. I hope I'm not disturbing you, Mrs. Raisin. You always are, Agatha said, then waved her inside. But you may continue doing so. Mrs. Bloxby's eyes drifted to the cigarette. A rare indulgence. A treat, Agatha insisted, after surviving historians, resin poisonings, and the WI. Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. A formidable trio. She perched on the edge of the sofa. I thought I'd check on you before evening service. It has been quite a week. That's one way to put it. Agatha tapped ash neatly into the tray. Everything back to normal now, as normal as Carsley gets anyway. Mrs. Bloxby looked toward the fire. Peace suits you. Agatha bristled instinctively. I don't need peace. I need excitement, danger, challenge. Of course, Mrs. Blocksby said kindly, but rest suits you as well. Agatha scowled at the compliment, unsure whether to accept or reject it. Mrs. Blocksby carried on gently, as though delivering a well-timed moral to a parable Agatha had not realized she was living. You know, she said, beauty fades, Mrs. Raisin. Charms fade. Even scandal fades. But truth. She touched the back of the sofa lightly. Truth ages better than beauty ever could. Agatha blew out a slow stream of smoke. Are you calling me old? Mrs. Blocksby smiled. I'm calling you honest. Agatha made a doubtful noise in her throat. Honest was not a word she'd ever associated with self-promotion, emotional self-defense, or strategic omission, all of which she considered essential survival skills. But still, the sentence lingered. Truth ages better than beauty. Well, Agatha said at last, truth never won anyone a beauty contest. Perhaps not, Mrs. Blocksby agreed, but it wins something better. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I'll leave you to your evening. Agatha nodded. Thank you. For everything. Mrs. Blocksby gave her a gentle, knowing look. You'll be all right, Mrs. Raisin. You always are. With that, she slipped out, closing the door with the quiet care of someone who understood solitude as well as company. Agatha sat for a long moment, cigarette burning low, fire crackling softly. Her eyes drifted again to the flames, amber glinting, shifting, impossible to hold. Beautiful, yes, but fleeting, always fleeting. She stubbed out the cigarette, exhaling the last of her smoky thoughts. Hodge chose that moment to abandon the good chair and pad over to her. Without ceremony, he leapt into her lap, kneaded twice, and settled with a pleased sigh. Oh, so now you want affection, she muttered, though her hand went automatically to stroke his warm fur. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen. The firelight softened. Agatha let her shoulders drop. Truth ages better than beauty, she repeated quietly. We'll see about that. Hodge purred louder, curling closer, and in the amber glow of the firelight, Carsley felt, just for tonight, exactly enough.